Okay, so we're going to talk today about fibromyalgia. There is no silver bullet. I'm Dr. Martin Rutherford. I am a certified functional medicine practitioner. I've been a chiropractor since 1979.
Dr. Randall Gates, I'm a board certified chiropractic neurologist as well as being a chiropractor.
And we're going to talk about how those two disciplines came together to be able to help to treat fibromyalgia patients rather successfully, I might add, and a little bit about our journey. We have a lot online on fibromyalgia. We struggled a little bit what to entitle this today to try to get people to watch it that we think need to watch it, because there's so many aspects to fibromyalgia, and it's such a fascinating entity in a sense that there's so much confusion out there. The name itself means pain in your muscle fibers. As you're going to find out in this next hour, it's not pain in your muscle fibers, it's nerve pain. It has a lot to do with brain, it has a lot to do with stress, it has a lot to do with immunity. It is a very complex and interrelated physiological problem, thus the term there is no silver bullet. And I think we're going to cover pretty well that subject. We have a lot of data online already, and I would encourage you to access that data. And I think what that data will do is to kind of inform you of the evolution of thought on fibromyalgia, even our evolution of understanding it year by year. I have a video online on fibromyalgia that it seems to be very well received. But we are currently just filmed another video a couple of weeks ago, which I don't know if it's going to get online or not. I think there might have been some technical difficulties, as they could call it. But the one 4 years ago, people still embrace. They still like it. They still feel it speaks to them. But the one that we did last week was an update almost to like the minute, within like 4 days of talking about research that was literally just 4 days previous. Oh no, we're doing it next week. Mm-hmm. Oh, we're doing the fibromyalgia. Sorry, that was the
thyroid.
That was the thyroid one, and you're going to find out why I messed that up, because thyroid and fibromyalgia are very, very interrelated. So anyway, it's a complex situation. If you look at our fibromyalgia work from before and listen to what we say now, you'll see the evolution. You'll understand the confusion. You'll understand why your rheumatologist doesn't want to treat you. And that's not to be mean to rheumatologists. I mean, we're just going to kind of go through the whole thing and why the rheumatology methods just are frustrating for them, because they really can't help you. But I don't think they really say that. And so we're going to talk about fibromyalgia. And I guess that was the introduction, kind of how we got into this. Essentially, I got sick. Yeah, I was under a lot of stress. I ended up getting pneumonia. Next thing you know, in retrospect, I mean, I put on a lot of weight out of nowhere. The pneumonia went too long. I didn't take care of it well. In the end, I should have taken care of it sooner. I've always had a bad gut in my life, and everything just seemed to explode after that pneumonia. I put 45 pounds on without really eating anymore. I was profoundly tired. I started to get achiness in my joints to where I would say to my wife, I can't explain it. I just hurt in every fiber of my being, were the exact words I used to use. And of course, I think she thought I was nuts or something, because I was under a lot of stress at the time. Hair started to thin. My bad bowels got worse, and I could go on and on. But the bottom line was I was very fortunate to become aware of an article that directed me to a chiropractic neurologist in Appleton, Wisconsin, Dr. Johnson, who I got to speak to on the phone. Seemed like a very sincere gentleman. Seemed like he knew what he was talking about. I didn't have to go out there. He was kind enough to allow me to purchase his materials on what he was doing for this. And I ended up utilizing them pretty successfully, helped my pain levels quite a bit. And then he directed me to another doctor in San Diego, a Dr. Datis Karazian. If you've never heard of him, he wrote a seminal book on thyroid called Why Do I Still Have Thyroid Symptoms When My Lab Tests Are Normal? Something every fibromyalgia patient should probably read. And he also just recently wrote a book on why isn't my brain working? And he was the first one I ever met who spoke of gluten and Hashimotos Thyroiditis. And you're probably sitting there wondering, what does all this have to do with fibromyalgia? It all has to do with fibromyalgia. And here I am today, and it's quite a few years later, but I feel very good. I have almost no problems. I have to watch my diet. I know exactly what I need to eat, what I shouldn't eat. I understand my specific parameters of what I need to do to stay well now that I have learned to control this fibromyalgia, which, by the way, I ended up having fibromyalgia, peripheral neuropathy. I ended up having Hashimotos Thyroiditis. This is the guy who diagnosed a lot of it. I ended up having celiac. And as a result, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue. So that's how we got here. How we got here, when I started doing this, I started into functional medicine because this was what Dr. Karazian was doing. And I started with fibromyalgia because that was the thing that Dr. Johnson was doing. It's what I had. It seemed to be the most complex condition to start with. It seemed like it would offer the most challenge and most opportunity to learn the most things. And indeed, that turned out to be the case, because even then we were just kind of in the ballpark of what was causing fibromyalgia. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Gates showed up here about 5 years ago, and he has given us the great opportunity to develop a lot of the theories and concepts that were just kind of vague and general at that point in time. Dr. Gates has done a massive amount of research on this subject, and it's resulted in us having a pretty solid program for addressing fibromyalgia. But back to the title, there is no silver bullets. Mm-hmm. And I think really that is the essence. I hope it attracted enough people, because I think we're going to share with you some majorly valuable data, majorly accurate data. If you're hearing it from our lips, I am telling you it is a fact, because we're using this data to work with fibromyalgia patients, and frankly, they're consistently getting well, with almost no exception. And there's a reason for that. There's a lot of reasons for that. We're going to discuss most of them. So these patients they get sick, something happens, there's a trigger. The triggers can be stress, it can be a surgery, it can be pregnancy, it can be a trauma. Yes. Trauma could be a car accident. A trauma could be a surgery, as I just mentioned. The next thing, for me, it was an overwhelming infection, pneumonia. The next thing you know, they have all of these weird and crazy, seemingly disparate symptoms. And what do? They go to the doctor, and the doctor kind of goes, oh man, I don't know, I don't want to deal with this. I mean, I'm not making fun. We work with MDs, okay? We work with osteopaths. I mean, we work in an integrated fashion. And then the GP sends them to
a rheumatologist.
Yeah. I take it from there.
I do.
Okay.
This is where I'm going to pick up.
He's going to talk. I'm not going to talk though.
So the first time I got exposed to this was going through Kelly's book of rheumatology. We're putting together a rheumatology training program for other doctors. We just met last night for our second meeting with another group of doctors where we're going to be training physicians on this matter. But in preparation for that, I started looking into some of the medical rheumatologists' opinions on things, especially fibromyalgia. And it was pretty surprising, frankly, to see that a lot of rheumatologists don't want to treat you being the fibromyalgia patient. And it's in black and white on the page there. And some do. And there are some rheumatologists who enjoy treating fibromyalgia and take it on as a challenge. But there's this growing group of rheumatologists who do not. And let me read you something. This is from jointandbone.org. Excuse me, I don't know where that came from. I did eat this morning. And this is from Dr. John Lutkemeyer, who is a rheumatologist in Pensacola, Florida. And he said, every specialty has its Achilles heel as it relates to diagnoses not supported by evidence-based medicine. In my opinion, it is time for rheumatologists to relinquish the responsibility of treating fibromyalgia patients. He said,
stop treating fibromyalgia patients.
He says, we should not be treating them. My desire to enter rheumatology was directly related to my interest in rheumatoid arthritis and other inflammatory arthritides. Those are things like lupus, Sjogren's disease, scleroderma. Maybe you've heard of them, maybe you haven't. But they're autoimmune issues where the immune system is killing the individual's tissues, their joints, so on and so forth. As he said, my interest was related to treating rheumatoid arthritis and other inflammatory arthritides, not chronic pain, secondary to the hypothesized altered processing of pain, heavily influenced by psychosocial problems evident in the vast majority of these patients. So basically he's saying that you're nuts, all of you are nuts, and it's in your head, and he doesn't want to deal with you, and nor do a lot of other rheumatologists.
And that's beyond, we're going to talk about a big stress component of fibromyalgia, but this is beyond that. They're saying, you need a psychologist, which many of you have heard. They're saying you need a psychologist, or you need to see a psychiatrist, or you need to pull up your bootstraps, or whatever. And that is a sourced.
Right.
That it comes from where?
jointandbone.org.
Okay.
And so this is a website for other doctors to communicate to other doctors on, and patients can read on it. I can send this to any of you out there who want to access this article. It's not attached to today because it's not a scientific reference, but it's a very lengthy article, and basically I just skimmed the surface on that because I can't read you the whole article. But in essence,
so that's what you're facing.
And what you're facing as the fibromyalgia patient is that your rheumatologist has a certain armamentarium, as we term it, of drugs. So he has a certain number of drugs he can use. Things like Neurontin, gabapentin, Lyrica, other drugs like antidepressants, venlafaxine. They can use tramadol on certain occasions, but they're not supposed to use morphine or opiates like hydrocodone. And so they're kind of handcuffed with what they can use, and they readily admit, and he even cites articles showing that most of the drugs you're on are not helping you and are not effective for fibromyalgia. And yes, some of you out there are saying, well, my Lyrica helps a certain bit, and it does, and that's what we've observed too. But what we're going to try and do today is get to the underlying causes as to why you're in so much pain and why this condition of fibromyalgia, which may represent 5% of the American population, is so misunderstood. And it's, in my opinion, somewhat of a travesty that the most widely accepted therapy right now for a fibromyalgia patient is aerobic exercise. And I'm sure right now, maybe some of you are throwing the telephone book at the camera right now.
Aerobic exercise.
Go for a walk, go for a jog. And most of you are thinking, well, I do that, or I can't even do that. I can't even walk across the house. And yet that is what the literature is showing to be the most effective therapy. What we're going to try and do is show you the underlying causes, the most up-to-date data. Dr. Rutherford brought up this morning, that our thyroid talk was like up to date to the minute when we did it.
Right. We actually were online just before we went on.
This is up to date as of 10 o'clock last night when I was pulling research articles, the newest of the newest stuff.
And just to say, so to get that, your rheumatologist doesn't want to treat you. But the reason they don't want to treat you is they don't know what to do. And they don't want to have people coming in and keep coming back, and they give you one thing, and came back, say it didn't work, and give you another thing and say it didn't work. So they're frustrated. They don't know what to do. Sometimes you just make excuses. Sometimes you become defensive. Sometimes you just say to the patient, I don't know what to do with you. And then you end up in pain management. And we can go into that. Okay. So, and we might get a little bit more hairy with pain.
I only laugh because he commented on that. You can read it.
So, okay. So this is where you are. This is where you are as a fibromyalgia patient. You're up against the wall. And I don't know about you, but I mean, I started feeling a little like, wow, I don't know if my wife really believes me, because I put some weight on, which is kind of interesting because at the time I didn't feel very good, so I wasn't eating very much. But you don't look that bad. It wasn't like I looked horrible, and I couldn't even do a treadmill. I've always considered myself fairly athletic throughout most of my life. I couldn't even do a treadmill for 5 to 10 minutes without crashing. without exceeding my metabolic capacity. And all this was so strange, but you look around and you wonder if anybody believes you. And then for me, I started like justifying, saying, no, you don't understand. I really don't feel well. And that was just all the more frustrating. So now here's where you are. Here's where I was at that point in time. And what we need to do now is to help you understand what you are dealing with. So what are you dealing with? What are the fibromyalgia patients suffering with?
Right. So the fibro patients are suffering with pain all over your body, as many of you know. Sometimes the shirt that you're wearing is painful. The bed sheets hurt your feet. Your husband touches you and you just want to jump away, and it's really interfering with intimacy. That's the pain aspect. Many times there are other symptoms that go hand in hand with fibromyalgia, such as chronic headaches, migraine headaches, irritable bowel syndrome, brain fog. In fact, many fibromyalgia patients report that their brain fog and things that short-term memory are their major complaints, and the pain is secondary because they don't feel right. They can't think the way they used to. They can't find their words. Their retrieval time is increased, and that actually there are neurological aspects to that, which we've cited. And there can be things like interstitial cystitis, which for you females out there, that's where you feel like you have to urinate all the time. You may have pain with intercourse with your significant other. So that's what most fibromyalgia patients suffer with.
And the symptoms come and go. You have good days, right? And then you have a good day, and what do? You go try to do everything that you couldn't do. You couldn't do a couple of days, and you try to get it all done, and then what happens? You crash. And the pain can move. It can move from one side to the other, from one arm to the other. What you would have to understand from a diagnostic perspective, what a nightmare that is for a doctor. When you walk in the door and you start throwing 20 different symptoms at them from theoretically 20 different systems or 20 different mechanisms or 20 different biochemical breakdowns. The thing is, it's not 20 different things. It's a couple of things that are creating this variety of symptoms that drive your doctors absolutely crazy. I do the intakes here. In other words, I do a 30, 40-minute consultation or longer if necessary to figure out whether that patient is a good candidate for what we do. And the fibro patient comes in, before I even look at their paperwork, I know they're a fibro patient because they sit there and they go, okay, doc, I'm going to be the hardest patient you've ever had. My doctors hate me. I drive my doctors nuts. I drive my endocrinologists nuts. They don't want to see me. My file is this thick. You don't want to really see my records, doc, because I got so many you couldn't read them in this lifetime. If you're saying that, you're probably a fibromyalgia patient.
And you have to understand where your doctors are coming from too. I mean, as Dr. Rutherford said, a lot of our friends are medical doctors, and they have 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes with you in order to ascertain what your symptoms are, if they can give you a medication or refer you, or that's basically what they're trying to do. And when you come at them with all these complaints, they get overwhelmed. You'll probably see their eyes get glassy-eyed because they just can't address all these things. And that's why there's a lot of frustration in medicine about fibromyalgia. Also too, because you're suffering, you're kind of not in a good mood, possibly. You may come off, a lot of our physician friends say, these fibromyalgia patients are whiny. Well, yeah, because they're in a lot of pain and they don't feel good.
Yeah, and they're limited by a diagnostic code. The Fibromyalgia Diagnostic Code is actually, there's this big book of diagnosis codes. I forget how many are today. There's like 10,000 today, something like that. And there's a whole section on muscular problems and all these different diagnostic codes of muscular problems. Well, guess what? Fibromyalgia is many things, but it is not a muscular problem. And it's kind of funny because so they're limited by that. So if you're going in there and your insurance is covering it, they're further limited to diagnoses that are within that code, which means there's really not a whole lot of things they can do. What that code allows them to do relative to treatment is what we've already talked about, giving you all those medications. Maybe I don't know. Can they send you to a physical therapist? Probably.
I think they can. They can do physical therapy is covered within that code.
But that's about it. But that's about, as you're about to find out, that ain't fixing you. That is not even on the spectrum of things that would help you, especially if you come in like our patients come in, hurt everywhere, can hardly sit there, can't move while I'm talking to them. They're trying to think, and they have brain fog, and their threshold for getting angry is about that much, and they're depressed. And yeah, I mean, if you're watching and you have fibromyalgia, that's the patient that's sitting in front of you, and that doesn't fit that diagnostic code, and it doesn't fit that 5 or 10 or 15-minute, I'll be generous, doctor-patient encounter. So it's almost impossible for, even if your doctor was given all the tools that he needed to diagnose you, it would be impossible to do in that shorter period of time. He's got a better chance of hitting the lottery, as you're about to find out. So how do you diagnose fibromyalgia? What is it, and how do you diagnose fibromyalgia? Let's really get into it. Now, that was kind of a big preamble, but the reason that we took a lot of time with that is because you need to know you're not crazy. You need to know why you've gone through what you're going through. And maybe you kind of need to know a little bit of why we are able to be part of a group that figured it out versus having to walk around with the handcuffs of diagnostic parameters and 10-minute office visits and dictated treatment parameters of having to give a medication, and why the alternative group, and I don't really consider us alternative, but people seem to think we are, why the alternative groups were able to come to grips with this. So what do you want to start? You want to start with the stress? You want to start with the immunity? You want to start with what do you want to start? Or you want to go over the overview? I'll throw this one to you.
I'm going to start with the individual causes. So as Dr. Rutherford said, your doctor has a hard time making a diagnosis that's going to help you, because in that 15 minutes, there are so many different issues. Those issues include Hashimotos Thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune, meaning the immune system is killing the thyroid gland here at the base of the neck. So that's number one, and we're going to go into this in full detail. 2 is stress. A preponderance, the statistics vary, but a large percentage of fibromyalgia patients have been through horrible abuse, physical, commonly sexual, emotional abuse as a young child. Number 3 is small fiber peripheral neuropathy. Neuropathy or peripheral neuropathy is where the nerves start to die and degenerate, most commonly in the feet, but it can spread to other areas of the body. We have different types of nerves. Some are big, some are small. The small ones involve pain. And so we're going to go over the new findings, how a huge percentage of fibromyalgia patients have small fiber peripheral neuropathy. And these are really the main factors. There are a few others that we're going to go into.
Stress? Did you say stress?
Yeah, stress is what
you did say that?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Exactly. No, it's okay. So those are the 3 major things that you have to ascertain. Now, we have our patients fill out a 17-page questionnaire. We sit with our patients for a total of an hour and a half in the examination. That's after Dr. Rutherford has sat with them for a half hour in a consultation.
Okay.
So we take an abundant amount of time to sit with you and really figure out what's going on that could potentially be causing your pain, because every fibromyalgia patient is different. Some have small fiber neuropathy, some don't. Some have been abused, or many have been abused, but some haven't. Lots of times there can be a major immune side to the case, even more so than just Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So all these individual factors have to be put together. And then that leads, to the general diagnosis of fibromyalgia, which in 1990 consisted of you being tender at 11 out of the 18 points throughout the body. And as Dr. Rutherford says, many fibro patients are tender at 500 points, which is true. And then in 2010, the American College of Rheumatology revised their guidelines on diagnosing fibromyalgia, such that basically someone who has pain all over their body, they have associated symptoms, like I said, brain fog, IBS, headaches. There's no definitive other cause, meaning the person doesn't have rheumatoid arthritis or lupus or multiple sclerosis to explain their pain, and they've had it for 3 months. In essence, they have fibromyalgia. And the studies have shown that basically that diagnostic criteria encompasses all of those of you who are tender on the treatment.
But those are symptoms.
Right.
They're basing their parameters of what a person who has fibromyalgia on symptoms.
Which is why Dr. Luketmeyer doesn't want to treat you.
Exactly.
Because there's no blood test. There's no MRI findings.
Yeah, no diagnosis. They're not saying like, okay, if you have positive rheumatoid arthritis factor, you have rheumatoid arthritis. End of story. Okay. Even that seems to be in question today, but I'm not going to get into that. But you'll notice all those were symptoms, because as of 2010 and today, the medical model has not come up with the causes. And if they do, and again, this is not to be denigrated because we do integrate with the medical, they're going to try to come up with a drug for it. And that's never going to happen. Remember the title, there's no silver bullet. And there is not, because if there was, we would have found it by now. So now so let's talk about these individually. Okay, stress, you did mention stress. You talked about this physical piece. One of the most shocking things to me. Now, I was going through a lot of stress at the time. I was going through a big battle. I was going through a big battle with a big government entity in this country, and it was a long battle at that point. It had lasted years and years and years and years and years, and so I thought I was handling it pretty well, but clearly that stress component was there. Now it makes sense to me, okay, that the stress can affect that. It doesn't affect your immune system. It can affect your brain. It can affect your gut. But I have been shocked as I started doing these intakes. I remember the first 2 or 3 fibromyalgia patients I had, and I'm hearing about sexual abuse. I'm hearing about verbal abuse. I had a gal 2 days ago, and she was saying I'm verbally abused by her current partner, physical abuse, being beaten, long-term stress like maybe I was experiencing. Maybe you walk into the room and your husband is laying there and you think they're dead. And we've
heard that one before.
So let's define stress a little bit better, because it's actually not that emotional stress. When I'm doing the intakes, people go like, well, no, I'm not nervous. I'm not stressed. I'm not, they have all the signs of it. But we're talking about a different component here.
Yeah, we're talking about subclinical or chronic stress. And so in essence, lots of times, especially early in childhood, if an individual is exposed to a very traumatic event like abuse or watching a loved one die or some horrific circumstance, then that causes their brain to produce a lot of signals down to their stress glands. The stress glands are called the adrenal glands. They sit above the kidneys and they make cortisol. They make things like adrenaline. The problem becomes such that once we've been exposed to a very horrific circumstance, that the brain becomes programmed. It starts learning that stress response and starts sending lots of stress signals throughout the body down to the stress glands. And that can lead to a chronic elevation in stress hormones. And that can be a very bad thing for pain sufferers. Right. So when I first got into this in my training,
that's an automatic response. That part of the brain that does that is in the same area as the part of the brain that controls your breathing and controls your heartbeat. So it's not something where the confusion that a lot of patients come in and go, well, I used to be stressed, but I'm not stressed anymore. All that's gone, and they're sitting there twitching and their eyes are fluttering. And these twitches and flutters are automatic signs of this. So it's not like you're thinking, oh, I'm stressed because I haven't filed my income taxes yet, or my husband's sticking me out or something. This is a underlying stress that's going 24 hours a day. I can't go to sleep because my brain's going a million miles an hour. I wake up in the middle of the night, I can't go back to sleep. So I just want to make that.
Absolutely, exactly. So then the body becomes programmed to make these stress hormones at too high of a level. And if you have
24 hours a day,
the right confluence of circumstances coming together, then that can lead your pain nerves to becoming more sensitized to pain. What I mean by that is that when I started my training in 2006, 2007, in essence, in this area, our understanding of fibromyalgia at that point was that it was a purely neurologic phenomena, meaning it was a problem in the brain and the spinal cord where too many pain signals were coming in there and the brain could not shut off those pain signals. Kind of think of the volume on your radio. The volume gets turned up a little bit too much for the pain nerves. The major theory as to why that was happening at that point was because there were a lot of these stress hormones in the system, and these stress hormones bind to the pain nerves and cause the pain nerves to start sending more signals. So if the pain nerve is doing this in terms of sending signals, all of a sudden it's doing this all the time. And then now all of a sudden you're starting to feel pain when you shouldn't feel pain. So that is how stress really affects you chronic pain sufferers. And
So you're saying that used to be thought to be one thing. It sounded like you were going to say.
Right. And so now, but we're going to go into all the other aspects that we now know, like small fiber neuropathy that's just come out really the latter part of 2013, readily acknowledged in 2014. We're going to talk about how the pain nerves send signals.
So when I developed this, I had the sensitivity all over my body. I felt like all my joints and muscles ached. But an interesting thing was my feet felt like numb, more numb for me. Okay, they weren't burning or anything. They felt more numb. And I had a previous incident in which I was a skier. Well, I mean, we're in Reno, Nevada. We were at the foot of the Sierra Mountains. We have like 20 ski resorts within an hour here. So I used to ski, and at one time I tightened my ski boots down pretty hard. I took them off, and they were numb. I had to use a hair dryer to bring them back to life, and it hurt. I don't know. Don't try it. Don't try this at home. It hurts. But I thought that was prior to this. I thought that had happened again after I had started to develop these symptoms, because my feet started feeling like that again. They were numb, and then they started feeling a little prickly. I thought, oh my God, this thing from my ski boots was back. And I thought I must have damaged some nerves. Now, I didn't, even though I had embarked upon this journey before Dr. Gates got here. When Dr. Gates got here, I said, why don't you do a neurological exam on me? And we found that
you have small fiber peripheral neuropathy.
That I had small fiber peripheral neuropathy, which half of the people who have fibromyalgia have, and we have people coming in here who have no clue. They kind of sort of know they have fibromyalgia, or they know they have fibromyalgia, they suspect they have fibromyalgia, but when you do the exam, and you frequently will find they have small fiber peripheral neuropathy, which they had no idea, correct?
Right. Exactly.
So go on with that. I think that's really interesting, and it's important to the subject.
So just to recap, peripheral neuropathy is where the nerves start to die and degenerate, specifically in the feet. It spreads up to the knees and can involve other parts of the body.
Occasionally the hands.
Yeah. And within something like the sciatic nerve is huge, just for any of you who have ever seen a cadaver. I mean, it's big. It's probably about an inch in diameter, depending on the individual. And so within that nerve, there are big nerves and there are smaller nerves. And the smaller, bundles of nerves. And the smaller nerves encode pain. And what we're finding in fibromyalgia patients is that those smaller nerves are preferentially dying and degenerating. And when they start to do that, they can produce too many pain signals. And that abundance of pain signals can be part of the reason why you're feeling so much pain. And that's why we did a broadcast a month ago saying fibromyalgia, the pain's in your nerves, not in your muscles. It's really, for all you wondering out there, even though you feel like you have pain in the muscles, there's really nothing wrong with your muscles for the most part. That's exactly. And so with the small fiber neuropathy, the nerves are degenerating. They're sending abnormal signals. Now, gosh, it first came out in the journal Pain in November of 2013. I thought I saw it in June, but I think it had to republish in November, where they showed half of fibromyalgia patients, it's like 41%, have small fiber neuropathy. That's a huge deal. That's just absolutely huge, because as Dr. Rutherford said, we've been seeing small fiber neuropathy signs and symptoms on our fibro patients for probably 3 years before that, but we just thought, are we making this up? Are we missing something?
Yeah, all the same thing. What is it? And you have to fix that to fix the fibromyalgia if the patient has it. If you're in that 60% or 50%.
Because those nerves are a huge generator, like I talked about, with the volume being turned up for you to be feeling pain. And then, are we going to go into central sensitization?
I think we should at that point in time, because it still goes back to what Dr. Gates was saying before about your brain not being able to filter out the pain. There are a lot of other reasons for it than what we thought before, but I think that we talked about how fibromyalgia, the pain wasn't in the muscle fibers, it was in your brain.
Right.
The pain is your brain.
It's actually in your brain. And so now let's back up, and let's say you've been through a major stress. And so we know that those stress hormones cause your pain nerves by itself to send more pain signals. And then we also know that small fiber neuropathy may be occurring in half of you out there watching this video. And that is causing an abundance of pain signals to come into your spinal cord and up to your brain. You then need to understand that our brain has natural systems in it to dampen the volume on pain. So it tries to turn down the pain signals. However, that balance can get shifted in fibromyalgia where the brain gets overwhelmed, such that all the pain signals coming in go into the brain and they become learned. And so now you have this problem where the brain is learning pain, and that's where the pain really becomes.
Brain can learn good things,
and it can learn bad
can learn bad things. And in your particular case, if you're a fibromyalgia patient, it's learning pain.
And we attach some brand new references to today's broadcast. 2015, there's this new imaging modality now. So we've known about functional MRIs. Functional MRIs, basically, they're an MRI machine, but they can see how much blood flows in a certain area of the brain. But now we have this new component to functional MRIs called connectivity studies. So you can see what parts of the brain are lighting up. So not only what parts are getting blood flow, but what parts are talking to other parts. And they see in you fibromyalgia patients that the area of the brain associated with sensing things from the body, touch, pain, things of that nature, is completely rewired compared to normal controls. And it rewires itself into the emotional area of your brain. Not surprisingly, but this is just really exciting data because now there are all these physical representations.
Exciting for being able to help fibromyalgia.
Yeah, objective representations, for that matter, of why you're feeling this way. And this flies in the face of what Dr. Luetkemeyer is saying, because he's just saying, well, we don't know what's wrong with you. You're nuts. You're over emotional about it. Sorry, I'm paraphrasing. But basically, he's saying that you have psychosocial issues, and that's why you're in so much pain. I will 100% disagree with that. And frankly, Kelly's book of Rheumatology does too, because fibromyalgia.
That's the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay. That just know the Bible of rheumatology, the Bible book that they teach in medical schools of rheumatology says that.
And they used to say, and Dr. Luetkemeyer still says, fibromyalgia is a diagnosis of exclusion. So you don't have rheumatoid arthritis, you don't have multiple sclerosis, but you have this pain. So we're going to call it fibro. That implies that we don't know anything that's wrong with you. And the fact of the matter is, hopefully 40 minutes, 45 minutes in this broadcast, you know that there are a lot of things that are wrong with you. And the data coming out week by week is becoming even more overwhelming as to why you as the fibro patient is suffering, because you have small fiber neuropathy, you've been under stress, your pain nerves have learned pain, now your brain has learned the pain, and now your brain's rewired itself. So no wonder there isn't a magic bullet that's going to take away all of your pain.
All of which can be reversed by handling all those things.
Exactly.
And rewiring the brain. This is what, so this is going to sound like a used car salesman thing, but this is what functional neurology does.
That's the point.
This is what functional neurology does. And I said in the beginning, it would become clear at some point why we melded our two disciplines. Functional medicine deals with, for example, in some ways the stress chemicals, but it deals with the autoimmune problems and the gut problems we're going to talk about and the Hashimotos that we talk about. But functional neurologists, the board certified chiropractic neurologists who are now being termed functional neurologists, whatever you want to call them, this discipline has learned how to rewire your brain or how to calm down these stress mechanisms, these automatic stress mechanisms, largely without drugs. It's rare that we have to send our patient to the medical doctor. We use a functional natural psychiatrist that we work with on occasion. Occasionally we work with osteopaths that may have to give the patient something to calm them down so we can get them through it until everything calms down so it can respond to the exercises and the stimulations and the strategies that Dr. Gates, the functional neurologist, can take care of. But this is how complex what you're trying to address is. And I guess maybe this is fresh in my mind because I just have had a couple of patients in the last couple of days who came in, and it's always kind of odd when the patient comes in and they've tried everything, nothing can help, but they're going to school us on this. They're going to school me on it because of what they've read on the internet. And you have to realize that when I was 25, I took this course and all that type of stuff. I got news for you. This stuff that we're going over has been gleaned by some of the top molecular biologists and immunologists in the world. The data has been compiled by groups of doctors. Dr. Gates has probably reviewed 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000, I don't think I'm exaggerating, references since he's been in this office. And to distill it down to what we're talking about now has been quite a challenge. And so this is why we had to meld the two disciplines, because the brain and the nervous system control everything. Well, guess what? Fibromyalgia isn't muscle pain. It is nerve pain, but the pain is in the brain. And you need some way to rewire that pain, and preferably without drugs, because that's what they're trying to do with you with the drugs. The drugs are effectively helping brain cells and chemicals not to function right, so that you don't perceive pain, and then you get those side effects and so on and so forth. So if the lyrical works for you, good, but there's a better way. Okay, and so now we're talking brain, now we're into it. Now we're into what causes the pain. So there's a couple of other huge parameters that we have seen consistently in the fibro patient. In our world, you come in here, fibromyalgia means you have everything Dr. Gates just got done talking about. You have a bad gut and you have Hashimotos Thyroiditis. So let's talk about one of those two things.
Okay, let's go Hashimotos.
Let's go Hashimotos. I have Hashimotos.
Yes, you do.
I'm like the poster boy for this, which is why I got into it. So, but it's been really great, because I was also I've been kind of a guinea pig along the way, and it's been really helpful for me to understand the process. But it's really been helpful for us here at the office to kind of ultimately get to the point where I finally had to say, okay, we fixed everything. I'm feeling much better, but I had to take a thyroid medication on top of everything else. About 25% of our patients, maybe it's growing, I don't know, but we use an integrated approach for Hashimoto's. You may not even know what it is. Let's talk about Hashimoto's, because if you truly have fibromyalgia, I'm telling you, there's about a 99.910% chance that you have it.
So the thyroid, as we said, sits here at the base of the neck, basically, front part of your neck. And the thyroid makes thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone goes throughout your body, and it gets converted into active thyroid hormone, and active thyroid hormone gives us energy. So when we have appropriate levels of thyroid hormone, let me just say it that way, you will have good bowel movements, you'll have good energy, you'll be less likely to have depression, your hair will grow thick, you'll have nice eyebrows, your body weight will be
enough energy for your body to do what it's supposed to do.
Your body weight will be good, you won't be overweight. However, the converse of that is when thyroid hormone levels are low, people tend to be constipated, lethargic, their hair is falling out, they don't feel good, their voice is raspy, on and on and on and on. Now, most of the time when someone has a low thyroid, the immune system is the cause of that low thyroid. So the immune system is killing the thyroid. It's called an autoimmune problem. It's not supposed to happen, but it's becoming an epidemic in this country. Now, with all that being said, you as a fibro patient can have normal thyroid hormones, but you can still have the issue where the immune system is killing the thyroid. And that immune attack creates inflammation throughout the body. So all of you lovers of inflammation, now we're here. So the inflammation can then be part of the reason why the pain nerves are sending more pain signals. So it's very analogous to when people get a cold or a flu, and all of a sudden they're achy and the bed sheets bother them. That's because they have a lot of inflammation in their body trying to kill that virus. Well, they're finding that Hashimoto's patients basically are in that state of inflammation all the time, or most of the time. And that can be a large predisposing factor to fibromyalgia, because just as I said, where the stress hormones bind to the pain nerves and cause more pain signals to be sent, so does inflammation. And it causes those pain nerves to become strong and keep sending those signals for a long, long, long period of time. So that's really Hashimoto's. And estimates can be as high as 26% of the female population have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. We'll get you the references on that. Other studies varied from 10% to 15% to 21% to 26%. It's a large group. And the reason why the stats vary is based on what they consider normal for these thyroid antibodies to be. So thyroid immune cells and immune cells to thyroid are called thyroid antibodies. So that's Hashimoto's thyroiditis.
Yeah, and what he was saying is you will go to one lab, and one lab will have a range from 0 to 64. And so if you're 76, then they'll say, okay, you got it. And if you're 62, they'll say you got it. But there are 5 other labs that'll say, if you're 62, you got it, because their ranges are 0 to 32. So it's all over the place. It looks like it's going to start to become a little bit more consistent over the next few years. So it's probably the higher end number that Dr. Gates is talking about. It's a huge percentage of people that have it. Everybody comes in here saying,
and really,
it seems like everybody comes in here has it. It's not everybody, but boy, it is just, everybody comes in here with Hashimoto's has it. We treat a lot of other things. We treat peripheral neuropathy, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic fatigue, celiac, Crohn's. We treat all this, and a substantial portion of those folks have Hashimoto's thyroiditis as well.
Which is why you should watch our thyroid talk from last week.
Yeah.
So we go over Hashimoto's at length.
And the last big piece, so we have these stress hormones killing you. I mean, they're going out through your body. They're creating all kinds of problems. They contribute to your short-term memory loss. They contribute to your brain fog. Well, guess what? So does the Hashimoto's contribute to that also. And now we're going to get into the third thing, and your depression. And now we're going to get into the third major area, and that's going to be the gut. Now, the gut is your liver, it's your pancreas, it's your gallbladder, which most of you are missing by the time you get here anyway. It's small intestines, it's large intestines. We're going to be talking mostly about small intestines, maybe a little piece of the large intestines. That's what we're going to be talking about mostly. So when we're referring to the gut, we're largely referring to that. Sometimes the things that we're going to talk about will cause an inflammation in your liver, or it might even cause your pancreas to be a little tender or something like that. But we're mainly referring to small intestines. Would that be fair to say?
I agree.
Okay, and what we're going to talk about. So the gut.
Gluten. So many of you have heard about gluten. Gosh, I think, what is it, like 100 million Americans at some point in the last year tried gluten-free foods. That's a big number. No wonder there's so much controversy and backlash about gluten.
For those of you who are aware, there's only 315 million Americans in this
because
country,
that's cutting into somebody's profits and helping someone else's profits, if you know what I mean. So basically, gluten is a molecule that's in wheat, barley, oats, and rye. And when you got into this in 2008, at that point, you were starting patients on the gluten-free diets. At that point in time, there weren't a lot of other gluten-free breads, gluten-free crackers available. So people just basically...
People didn't even know what gluten was just as recently as 2007, 2008.
So then they started eating, you had them eating meats, vegetables, and fruits and things like that. Say all that to say that there have been anecdotal reports coming out about fibromyalgia patients going on a gluten-free diet, feeling better. And so a study came out in Rheumatology International, November last year, where they put 20 fibromyalgia patients on a gluten-free diet. And out of their sample of 20 fibromyalgia patients, they found all of them to have inflammation in their intestines. They did not have celiac disease, which is an autoimmune problem to gluten. It has a very specific way of being diagnosed. If you want to see that, go to our gluten talk that we did last spring. But with fibromyalgia patients, they didn't have celiac disease, but they did have intestinal inflammation that can sometimes be seen with gluten problems. So these rheumatologists took these fibro patients off of gluten, and they saw that all 20 of them had basically a remission in their fibromyalgia. They got off pain meds. They went back to work. They felt better. Their pain scores went way down in a period of 16 months. To see a study where everybody gets better, and I know 20 is not the biggest sample size, but for all 20 to get better is pretty significant. So that's why we did a talk on gluten and fibromyalgia. You need to know that foods, the gut relation to pain is becoming an ever expanding and rapid expanding topic in the literature. It is the centerpiece of what we do. It's not everything we do, but it's the centerpiece, because if you think about it, 70% of your immune system is here. We've been talking about immune inflammation for a while now in today's broadcast. And so we're finding that the American diet, certain aspects of the American diet, things like gluten, can be hard to break down, possibly for some people. Possibly some of the foods that we standardly consume in this country are creating bacterial imbalances in the gut, which is creating inflammation, which can spread throughout the body and cause someone to feel pain all the time, be depressed, not be able to think clearly, on and on and on. So that's the study and the data on gluten.
And if you get gluten, and relative to the study that Dr. Gates was referring to, that is a profound study. All 20 people got improvement. But what we have seen is that if you get off gluten, it's out there quite a bit. So a lot of patients today, whereas 2007, 2008, people coming in were like, what's gluten? And, oh, that's weird. And, oh, my doctor says you're crazy. And I'm not getting that anymore. Now I'm getting, I tried to get off gluten, it didn't work. Or I tried to get off gluten and it worked for like a couple weeks or 6 weeks, and then it kind of didn't work. just know most of the time gluten is going to be just the tip of the iceberg. If you have a gluten sensitivity, and we're not going to get in, you can look online for our talks on gut problems, on irritable bowel, because we're talking about it in general terms right now. But if you have gluten sensitivities, you probably have damaged the inside lining of your intestines, which is very thin. I have seen estimates of 1 to 5 cells thick. So you're going to end up probably with intestinal permeability. You can look up our talk on that. Leaky gut, that's the same thing as intestinal permeability. There's a good chance you can end up with something called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. If you combine that with the fact you got a bad thyroid and you're not making things well, you may not be making something called hydrochloric acid in your stomach. You can look up our talk on that. So which means you may not be killing bacteria going there. So your gut, if you're a fibromyalgia patient, you could have parasites in there. You could have H. pylori. You could have imbalance in bacteria. You can have all these things, okay? And if you are sensitive to gluten, there's a good chance, or I would even say a probability, that you have at least some of them. And so if you've gotten off the gluten, grains, I didn't even mention grains. One of the big, most cross sensitivities to grains or gluten is grains. So now I'm getting a lot of people coming out. I did the paleo diet and I felt better for a while, but then I didn't feel better. Dr. Gates was just getting into other food sensitivities. Mm-hmm. So it's going to damage it. The gluten's probably going to damage your gut. You're probably going to have some measure, either mild, moderate, or severe damage to the inside of your gut, creating something called an intestinal permeability. Most people know as leaky gut today. I just have something for that name. I don't know what it is. Leaky gut. And you can have good food particles. So you can be eating good food. It's supposed to be broken down. And then the good stuff's supposed to be absorbed in your intestines. The bad stuff's supposed to go in the toilet. Well, some of the bad stuff doesn't go in the toilet. It goes through that leak. And now your immune system, which your fibromyalgia patient has a totally screwed up immune system, looking to kill everything in sight, because it's already killed your thyroid and it's looking to kill other things, sees that piece of foreign object, thinks it's like a bacteria or virus, just it knows it doesn't belong there, attacks it. And now you have a food sensitivity to corn or oranges or what else? What other bizarre ones have you seen? Broccoli. Yeah. And who would that? Well, and so that's the person that comes in here and says, well, I got off gluten and I eat better than anybody on this planet, but I still get bloated and I still get these symptoms. And I mean, I eat broccoli and I eat spinach. I'm a vegetarian. How could I get sick? You get, and again, this is how complex this can be, but that's the confusion that you're up against. And if you're that person who has read all of the books and you're on a vegetarian diet and you're on the vegetarian paleo, non-grain diet, and you're still sick, I don't mean to laugh, but we hear these things all the time, and you're still sick, this is why. It's a complex physiological problem, and it leads to immune inflammation, and you can tie it into the thyroid. Absolutely. So then back to the thyroid. A huge percentage of Hashimotos Thyroiditis patients have antibodies to gluten. And now they're saying, we think that 26% of you females out there have Hashimoto's thyroiditis because of intestinal inflammation, causing inflammation in the system. And that inflammation causes the thyroid cells to allow the immune system to attack them. It's a complicated mechanism. I'll explain to any of you via email that you want, but basically that's what they're showing. Intestinal inflammation is causing Hashimoto's, in part amongst other things like viral infections, amongst things like stress. And what they think happens is that the intestinal inflammation gets the immune system so overreactive that we start missing viruses, and viruses can start to live in the thyroid. And now we have this vicious cycle. Now the immune system's trying to kill the thyroid. Now your brain's going, now your brain fog is going like, are these guys crazy? This is like, well, yeah, exactly. Look at all of the stuff that's going on here. So that's why we say there's no magic bullet. There's no magic bullet. That's why aerobic exercise and Tai Chi are becoming the gold standard treatments for you fibromyalgia patients, which I still feel is a travesty, because these factors that we're talking about, which are readily acknowledged in the literature, lack a group of physicians that really approach it and handle each one sequentially in an organized fashion. And they do that because they are put into this corner of their specialty, right, and their code. And to try to simplify everything we just got done saying, you have multiple systems that are breaking down. And the major systems you have are breaking down is your immune system, your digestive bowel system, and your brain's ability to manage pain. Those are the three big systems. One you would think would be neurology, one would be gastroenterology, another one would be immunology. Good luck in getting those three disciplines together on this, because that's not the way the medical model is designed. And I don't know that it's going to change anytime soon. And that's why, again, I go back to the fact that the alternative groups were able we were actually in a better position to develop these understandings, because we had a background. We're chiropractors too. Chronic pain. How many have back and neck pain and hip pain and those types of things? Well, really, your medical doctor doesn't have an ability to evaluate those very well. I was even talking to an orthopedist the other day who said, "Hey, doc, you've explained all this to me. My wife is going to start care, but I got to tell you, I'm an orthopedist. I look at the MRI, it's degenerated, it needs to be replaced. And it's a hip, I replace it." He says, I don't know all this stuff. All right. So even in that category, trying to diagnose musculoskeletal pain is impossible if you haven't studied the 632 muscles and the 232 joints, and I'm probably off a few on those, but close to 1,000 structures that we as chiropractors, that's where we live. But people don't realize we get a pretty good diagnostic background. And I know in my school, we had several subjects, several courses on nutrition, and we actually had 2 courses on drug interactions with and drug symptoms and stuff. So, and the things that we do really aren't things that require, I don't know, the same thing that a drug would need to require to get through. You have to spend millions of dollars to figure out that if you start doing certain exercises to the brain and that part of the brain gets stronger, you're not making anybody worse. If you're using herbs and botanicals, by the way, we found that herbs and botanicals for fibro patients can be very exacerbated, that less is more. But we have a much greater leeway to be able to try things because we're not going to be hurting anybody. We're not going to be.
Well, and that's the hard part about doing research. So Dr. Lukenmeyer said, there's no clinical studies. What he's saying there is that in medicine, they want a randomized, controlled, double-blinded clinical trial on everything. They want to see that you do one thing and that one thing makes a big change. You do Tai Chi, you feel better. You take Lyrica, you feel better. Hopefully you understand after watching this for an hour now that this problem of fibromyalgia, why you are suffering, is multifaceted. There are many things wrong in your body likely that are causing you to feel this way. It's nearly impossible to do a double-blind randomized controlled trial on a fibromyalgia patient the way we're doing it, because we have so many things we have to address. And that's why we titled this, "There is no silver bullet," because in our experience, there's not, at least at this point in time. And so,
There won't be.
So none of this is said to be denigrative to your rheumatologist or your doctor. Okay, we're just trying to present the overall issue for you, because we know a lot of you are suffering out there. You don't know why you're not getting better. Your husband doesn't believe you that you're in pain, on and on and on. And hopefully by the end of watching this, you'll kind of have a better idea of what's going on. Please access our other talks on fibromyalgia. We talk about things like the effect of a supportive spouse versus a non-supportive spouse. We talk about things like gluten and thyroid and irritable bowel syndrome, which we couldn't even touch on in this broadcast, which a lot of you out there suffer with, which also accounts for 50% of a gastroenterologist practice. And that's not really what they want to treat. They want to treat Crohn's disease and celiac disease and ulcerative colitis. So I think we made our points. Anything else?
No, I thought that was very good. I mean, we could do a 250-hour course on how to address all the things specifically that could come up within the framework of what we just talked about. But this is the framework. When you come into our office, if you have Hashimoto's, if you have signs of an overfiring sympathetic stress mechanism, like post-traumatic stress syndrome, if you have a bad gut, and you probably have an autoimmune problem, you at that point are diagnosed in our office with fibromyalgia. We don't use the term really because the term's a not applicable term. It just means pain in your muscle fibers. And so that's what you need to know. You need to know this is what's causing your problem. There are ways to take care of it. There are ways to manage it, mostly without medication. And I think that's an important thing to know. We're not anti-medication. We refer when necessary. We work closely with the medical community on many of our cases, but by and large, most of this can be done with lifestyle changes, specific targeted understandings of your diet, methods to calm down that stress mechanism that are drug-free, figuring out that gut, which can be done even though you've been to the, you've had colonoscopies and endoscopies that have told you that you're normal. We just need you to know that, first of all, you're not crazy. Second of all, you can be helped. So that's really what I wanted to say. I go with Dr. Gates. We have probably 180 hours or more online. Everything we have talked about today has a specific presentation attached to it somewhere online. Please feel free to access those. If you have any questions, if you have anything that you want to ask, please feel free to contact us, as Dr. Gates said, and he will do his best to answer your questions.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this was helpful.
Thank you for watching.
Okay.